Okay, so this energy assurance orientation is geared for local jurisdictions. This slide breaks out how the rest of the presentation will go, and it's broken into 3 sections. The first section is going to give you an overview of the ESF-12 and how that fits into the emergency management picture. Next, we'll cover the energy assurance response plan, the actual document that we've developed. And then we'll finish up with local energy assurance planning and show you where you can find some of the resources to help your local jurisdiction do some planning for energy assurance. So we're beginning with this section on ESF-12. This will give you an overview of ESF-12 to give you the idea of how ESF-12 will function and where it fits into that big puzzle of emergency management. We'll talk about the purpose and the scope of ESF-12, define the agency roles and responsibilities, and then we'll also introduce the new response model that's been developed just for energy emergencies. So starting at the federal level, nationally, we do have a document that helps organize and give directives and pretty much lay out the groundwork or the basis for emergency management nationwide. That document is the National Response Framework. It consists of 5 components. The core document basically, again, lays down the doctrine for emergency management. The second component is emergency support function annexes, and that is actually the ESF function where you find the ESF-12 along with 15 other emergency support functions. Another big part of the emergency management picture nationally is the National Incident Management System. That system is designed to ensure that everyone across all jurisdictions, across the private sector and the public sector are able to have a standardized way of communicating. There's a standardized incident command, and it's important that any organization that's involved in emergency management has their personnel trained under NIMS. Okay, and also within the emergency management response system, you've got a layered response strategy. And that is related to how you need to call on support for when the incidents usually occur at the local level and you've got your resources that are available to help. But when those resources become overwhelmed, it's necessary to call on your neighbors. So you've got the regional response systems, you've got the state response, even up to federal response during those major crisis or catastrophic events that require a lot of capabilities and resources. The AZ-CIRC emblem is a great way to depict that relationship and the association and the reliance, the partnership that goes on in order to accomplish an effective emergency response. You've got industry, academia, community, and the government all working hand in hand to make sure that emergency response goes down smoothly. In Arizona, we have a document similar to the National Response Framework, but this is state-specific. It's the state plan, Arizona State Emergency Response and Recovery Plan, or the SERP. That document is designed, again, to provide the basis and direct response to all types of emergencies in the state of Arizona. All right, so the Arizona ESF-12 is intended to describe the procedures that are necessary to restore energy systems. The energy systems are owned by private companies, so they are responsible for their own infrastructure and their own maintenance and responding to incidents that bring those services down. But the government is there to help maintain or provide support when the need arises. A big part of that is the communications. So if the systems fail and the public is without those services, those are critical services, there's going to be big concern. So that's where the government is going to be mainly involved in helping facilitate the process of getting those services back online, and also helping communicate to the public and manage any problems that may arise as a result of those shortages. ESF-12, they're collecting information, evaluating it, looking at the demographics that we have in the state of Arizona, trying to determine vulnerabilities. They may help facilitate in the case of a shortage or an interruption in service. by a way of legal authorities or providing waivers to assist the utilities in getting back online. The structure of the ESF-12. The coordinator in this case for ESF-12 is the Division of Emergency Management, that's ADEM. You've got your primary agencies, that's the Governor's Office of Energy Policy, the Arizona Corporation Commission, and then you have the support agencies. The support agencies may have unique abilities or capabilities to provide support when the primary agencies call upon them for help. The roles of the primary agencies, mainly, again, the Governor's Office of Energy Policy, they are the lead agency. They will maintain a level of preparedness and anticipate the emergency to the best extent possible. The Arizona Corporation Commission, they have a responsibility for overseeing the state's regulated pipeline, natural gas, and electric industry. Support agencies, again, they're there because they have unique capabilities to provide support when needed. Particularly the Department of Weights and Measures, they have a unique role in the monitoring and evaluation of things that occur in the transportation fuels industry. Support agencies also include local and tribal jurisdictions, the private utilities, local business operations, as well as at the federal level, we've got the Department of Energy and Department of Homeland Security. So now we're going to introduce the 4 phases of an energy emergency. This is a new model that was developed by NASIO, and this has been adopted into the energy emergency response phases. This is unique to energy emergencies. It's not utilized in any other part of emergency management, so don't get it confused with any of the FEMA response models. In phase 1, we have monitor and alert. This is the everyday situation, ongoing, business as usual. We're doing our planning, we're monitoring what's taking place in the market conditions for energy systems, making sure that we're keeping in contact with the networks, the networks of communication contacts that we have both in the public and private sectors. In phase 2, this is when we may have heard about some possibility or a small incident. We get news of something that may have occurred or may be occurring in the marketplace or within our infrastructure that could have an effect on the delivery or supply of energy. This is when we're kind of ramping up our communications, calling to check on status of an incident and making sure that things are getting back on track. And if there's a possibility that this could lead to a shortage that would cause a problem, then we're looking at the possibilities for developing plans or strategies to deal with that problem. If it's determined that there is some type of action needed or response that's necessary, we move into phase 3. That's actions and feedback. In this phase, that's when we may roll out mitigation measures or conservation measures. We would appeal to the public to begin voluntary conservation. We would ask the government agencies to reduce their use of supplies. And in very severe situations, the governor may proclaim a state of emergency. Right, so in phase 4, this is kind of the completion of the cycle. This is when we're returning back to normal. We're looking at the situation that occurred, we're reviewing lessons learned. We want to evaluate the response, look at the chronology of the actions that were taken to respond to it, and identify any ways to improve response for the next time. Moving on to the next section here, this is where we're doing an overview of the Arizona Energy Assurance Response Plan. This is the actual document that was developed to try to provide an outline and give an understanding of what energy assurance is and how in Arizona we can prepare ourselves for a response to energy emergencies. In this section, we're going to start out with a brief discussion about what energy assurance is and what it means for us at the state level as well as at the local level. We'll talk about how our approach when we began to develop the energy assurance plan. And then much of the plan is made up of the different sectors of energy that are in Arizona, and we're going to just do a brief overview of each of those sectors. So here we've got a video that's kind of introducing us to energy assurance, and this was a video that was developed by NASIO, and it's got some great information in there, and it's a great way to kind of kick off and get you thinking about what energy assurance means for you.
I realized the importance of energy emergency preparedness when I became involved in the state's Emergency Operations Center responding to the petroleum shortages that resulted from the Arab oil embargo in November of 1973.
Energy assurance is ensuring we have energy supplies for our nation.
You know, we all are going to be impacted at some point by a natural disaster, and we need to plan for these, and energy assurance will help us because usually when a natural disaster happens, there are energy disruptions of some type.
Energy is a finite resource, and it doesn't matter if you're talking about natural gas, petroleum, propane, electricity, doesn't matter. There's only so much.
Everybody would have to, especially in these positions, be very interested in energy assurance. Just a short blip in petroleum deliveries is going to have a huge impact.
It's going to affect people's jobs. It's going to affect possibly their safety, their health. Even simple things like if you lose refrigeration, you might end up eating contaminated food.
What's going to stop the coal train that's going to supply the coal to burn in the generation plant, that delivers the electricity, that delivers the ability for you to pump gas out of your gas station? What's going to happen if that stops? What will happen if the electricity stops and you go to buy some milk for the hungry baby and you go to swipe your card? Because none of us really carry cash anymore. We're waiting on a credit card or a debit card.
Everyone thinks that my cell phone's going to work in an energy emergency. Well, they don't realize that the towers only have a limited supply of backup generation. And without that, your cell phones won't work.
It's going to affect public welfare if we can't assure energy.
Most energy emergencies that we've experienced over the years do not confine themselves to a single state. More often than not, they impact multiple states.
How well do you communicate on a regional level? And that's key.
When we have a storm that hits our state, a hurricane for example, that can actually have less impact than when we have a major storm that hits the Gulf, because we're relying on essentially the Colonial Pipeline bringing oil supply to our state. You know, if that supply line gets disrupted, that's when we have the major problem.
One of the interesting things about Texas is that we provide over 25% of the nation's oil refining capacity to the rest of the nation. So when something happens in Texas, it could potentially have a direct impact on the rest of the United States.
I think the East Coast needs to clearly understand their reliance on the Gulf. When things start happening in the Gulf, you know, it creates some havoc all the way through our region.
About half of our gas supply is dependent upon electricity. And when we don't have electricity, we will not be able to provide gas to our state and potentially to the rest of the nation.
It's a very complex infrastructure when you talk about the interdependencies.
Every state is different, and every state plan is going to be different. The plans that are going to be developed by a state like Texas or New York or California are going to be quite different than the plans developed by a state such as Wyoming or Maine. Going to be different from states that are heavily dependent on petroleum products, for those states that have more natural gas use or more coal for their power generation. And these plans need to be tailored to the particular and unique needs of each of the states.
We produce almost none of our energy in state. So we are reliant on international delivery from the Gulf Coast. Fuel for our electricity comes in from Wyoming or West Virginia.
We're the #2 financial center in the nation after New York, and continuity is critical with electronic banking, with everything that the modern bank does. Continual energy and energy dependability is fundamental in their work. It's fundamental to our economic system.
We have been looking at, in Georgia, from the emergency management perspective, as we have noticed since 9/11, there's been a significant focus on interoperability and communications, and we employ the emergency support function system in our state. Emergency support function 12 is energy, and we are trying to get that same attention put on energy insurance.
Any man-made or earthquake event that's coming to be, whatever your preparations are, whether it's for the earthquake or a fuel shortage or floods or whatever event occurs, all of these plans still fit.
events happen at the local level. They're the first people on the scene. When energy disruptions happen, they are the ones that find out first. They're the ones who have to answer the questions to their constituents.
Of threats that would affect the city of Wilmington locally, we're a port community. So we have the city of Wilmington ports close by. We also have a nuclear power facility in Brunswick County, which is a neighboring county to the city of Wilmington. And then additionally, we are constantly bombarded with hurricanes. And so the supply disruption are numerous.
There are a lot of events that can occur that could jeopardize public safety if you lose power, don't have a reliable power system.
Energy disruption can occur without an emergency happening. So most people think of emergency measures with like a tornado, a natural disaster event, but an energy disruption can occur because it's 110 degrees outside and we cannot provide sustained electrical power that's needed. So that can cause a brownout.
Energy assurance is a fairly new concept for local government. So the link, I suppose, is primarily with having the individual, the one go-to person within the community that can answer the preparedness questions.
That video does offer a lot of great perspectives from different people, and energy assurance can mean something different to you depending on where you fit in. If if you are someone from the private sector or someone from the public sector. This slide here gives you a couple of the basic elements of energy assurance and continues to help get you thinking about what energy assurance can mean for you. We've got one of the components here, energy market awareness, continuity of operations, and then the emergency management aspect of it as well. Energy assurance really doesn't require reinventing the wheel. So when you're looking at the emergency response or emergency management, we're really not making up a new way of responding to it. You're really continuing to follow the typical incident response models, and we're really using that all hazards approach. The Energy Assurance Response Plan, it is a living document, and we really can only provide a snapshot in time, particularly in the energy markets or energy industry. Things are constantly changing. So it's really important that we constantly update and make changes to the plan. So we're calling it a living document. It's never really truly finalized. Another philosophy that we had when we were developing the plan was, or the approach that we took, we began with just defining the geography and the demographics of Arizona. We've got a great variety here in Arizona. We've got very dense populations in the center, in Maricopa County. Then we've got these very isolated, very rural areas, lots of different geography. Up in the highlands it can be snowing, and then in the lowlands it can be 75 degrees and sunny. So understanding the needs for energy was a big part of that. We needed to identify the critical infrastructure that we had here in the state of Arizona. We wanted to understand the inner workings of the markets, identify the necessary resources that we have, and then look at whatever possible vulnerabilities that we have as well. And then finally, developing that key industry contact list was a very, very important part of putting together a plan. The final objective of the plan was to reduce the energy emergency's impacts on the state's economy, health, safety, and welfare. We also wanted to ensure that the message was clear that the state's responsibility is really to communicate, coordinate, aid, and assist, and the private sector, the owners of the infrastructure, the energy service providers, they're going to take responsibility for going out and getting their systems back up and running. We began to develop a chapter for each energy sector, and we looked at the state's energy profile in that sense. So we began to contact different energy stakeholders, we gathered their input, and we consulted with subject matter experts, and we put together a chapter on each of these different sectors: transportation fuels, natural gas and propane, electricity. We looked at the water and energy nexus. Water is a very important component, or a very important resource in Arizona. We looked at cybersecurity and how that can have an effect on all of the sectors. We also tied in the communications and the public information aspect of energy emergencies as well.